This happened about 5 years ago. I work for a company that manufactures food products, and a few times a year we get sent out on business trips to participate in regional department store events in other prefectures. These trips usually last about a week. This particular time, I was sent to Osaka to take part in a food fair held at a department store located right next to the train station. The organizers had handled the hotel booking, so I was staying in a small business hotel just steps away from the venue. It was the kind of place you wouldn't even think about twice. Clean, simple, cheap, just a place to sleep between long shifts. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I've always had trouble dozing off in unfamiliar environments, and even though I was physically exhausted, I kept tossing and turning in my bed. I kept shifting positions, trying to find that one spot where my mind would finally let go. But no luck. Then, I heard footsteps. At first I thought it was just my imagination. The low hum of the air conditioner maybe. But the more I listened, the clearer it became. Soft, deliberate footsteps. Not from the hallway. Not from the room next door. The sound was coming from inside the room. Specifically, from the area past the main door where the unit bath and toilet were. That tiny, sealed-off cubicle. My hotel's bathroom. I was alone. I knew I was alone. There was no one else in the room, but it sounded like someone was pacing around in there, slowly, back and forth. Quiet, damp footsteps on tile. I told myself it had to be something else. Sound carries in hotels. Maybe it was coming through the walls or the vent. The layout of these business hotels is basically copy and paste. All the rooms are the same. But even as I tried to rationalize it, the feeling in my gut started to turn. There was something wrong. It wasn't just the sound, it was the presence. Like the air had shifted, grown almost heavier. I sat up, heart racing, and slowly got out of bed. I crept towards the bathroom door, barely breathing. I didn't open it. I couldn't. But I could feel it. Something was standing right on the other side. Instead of opening the door, I reached out and flipped the light switch. The bathroom door had one of those little frosted glass panels in the center, the kind meant to let a sliver of light in so you don't stumble around in the dark. I figured if the light came on and I didn't see anything in that little panel, I could tell myself I was just being paranoid. But the moment the light flicked on, something blocked the window. A black shape, large, dense. It slammed against the door from the inside with a force so violent, it made the whole door shake in its frame. I could barely breathe. My body moved before I could think. I bolted. Still in my pajamas, I fled the room. I didn't even stop to grab my key. I didn't wait for the elevator. I didn't look back. I tore down the emergency stairwell, barefoot, all the way to the ground floor. When I got there, I realized I had a problem. My key was still in the room, and I had no way of getting back in. I found one of the hotel staff and begged them to come upstairs with me. I must have looked like an absolute lunatic, but they agreed to accompany me upstairs. We opened the door together, slowly, cautiously. My hotel room looked normal, empty, but something was off. The door to the bathroom had been left wide open, and inside, the floor was soaking wet. Not just a little damp, but saturated. There were no towels out, no leaks, no explanation. Just that sealed little bathroom. Water pooling across the floor as if something had been moving around inside. I didn't say anything, neither did the member of staff. I stayed in that room for the rest of the trip. I had to. I had no other choice. I stayed there for several more nights. Fortunately, nothing else happened, but I couldn't bring myself to shut the door to the bathroom after that. I kept the light on in there, every night, just in case. Even then, I barely slept. To this day, I still don't know what I saw, or what I almost saw. But sometimes when I'm alone in a hotel room, I think back to that door, that sound, and that shape that filled the window. I've since read about shadow people. Some say they're spirits of the dead, souls trapped between this world and the next. Others believe they're something older, not ghosts, not human, something demonic, something that feeds on fear. And some places, hotels especially, seem to attract them. Maybe it's the constant churn of people, the loneliness, the rooms where bad things happened that never made it into the papers. I wonder about that bathroom. Why the floor was wet, and what kind of guests stayed there before I did, and whether one of them never left. All I know is, when I saw that black mass hit the door, I don't think it was trying to scare me. I think it was desperate to get out. Since I've managed to get back on my feet lately, I thought I'd try writing down a personal experience, one that seriously scared me. This might end up being kind of long, so I'll just apologize for that up front. It happened over 10 years ago, back when I was in a university. I was a student living in Tokyo. At the time, I was really into lucid dreaming. I used to try it out all the time. You probably already know what lucid dreaming is, but just in case, it's when you become aware that you're dreaming while still inside of the dream. And then you can control what happens, more or less. In my case, my lucid dreams always started whatever setting the dream initially gave me. I could act freely within that world, but only within its limits. Whenever I tried to push beyond what I already knew, like go somewhere unfamiliar, I'd suddenly wake up. For example, if the dream took place in a town I'd visited on a trip, I could walk around the familiar area, no problem. But the moment I tried to go further than I'd actually been before in real life, the dream would break and I would wake up. Also, for whatever reason, I couldn't do the flashy, fantastical stuff like flying through the sky, or shooting fried chicken out of my hands or anything weird like that. No, not in my dreams. What could I do? Was basically anything I could do in real life. That became the unspoken rule for how my lucid dreams worked. At first it was hard to get it going. If I managed to pull it off even once a month, I was happy. But by the time I graduated, I'd trained myself enough that I could enter a lucid dream about once every 3 days or so. Back then I just enjoyed the worlds my dreams gave me. The ones I liked the best were the dreams set at high school. I'd find the girl I used to like, ask her out, go on little dream dates, sneak a kiss here and there. They were honestly some of the best and happiest moments I can remember. But after graduation, I got hired by a mid-sized tech company doing systems designs, and my life turned into a cycle of relentless overtime. I was staying up late every night, drowning in work. It was a black company. My resentment towards the company, and specifically my boss, built up fast, and before long, my dreams started revolving around work too. Thanks to the lucid dreaming skills I'd honed during college, I started using my dreams to blow off steam. I'd punch my boss in the face, trash the office, let all that buried frustration erupt in the safety of a world I controlled. I was never afraid of mixing up dream and reality, because whenever a lucid dream began, there was always this strange falling sensation, like a sudden grip tightening around me right before sleep paralysis. It was distinct enough that I could always tell the difference. That routine went on for about a year, but the workload never got any lighter. In fact, it only got worse. I'd wake up, work till midnight, then fall into bed and spend my dreams screaming my rage into the void of my fake office. Somewhere along the way, maybe from sheer exhaustion, I started having lucid dreams every single night. Then came the Wednesday that changed everything. As usual, I worked late into the night. I dragged myself home and collapsed into bed. I thought I fell asleep, but the next thing I knew, I was awake again, and it was Thursday morning. I figured I must have slept like a rock from how tired I was, and although I was annoyed at missing a dream, I was also running late, so I rushed out the door. Thursday passed, another exhausting day, and that night I was determined to get back into a lucid dream. But when I woke up again, it was Friday. 2 nights in a row without a dream? It irritated me way more than I expected, but I powered through Friday, came home, went to bed, ready to blow off steam, and yet again I woke up in the morning, Saturday, 3 days in a row without a dream. It felt wrong. I figured maybe I'd just been too tired all week, so I told myself I'd cut out early that day and really relax. I left the house determined to make the most of the weekend, but that Saturday turned out to be the worst yet. All day long, my boss kept hounding me, berating me over things I hadn't done, things I didn't even remember being assigned. By the time evening came, I was boiling with frustration. I barely held myself back. The moment the clock hit closing time, I shot out of there. I rushed home and I dove straight into bed. Sleep took me instantly. But I didn't dream. I woke up. Just another morning, I nearly lost it. It was Sunday though, so I figured I could at least try to take it easy. I lay in bed scrolling on my phone, trying to calm down, and that's when my phone rang. It was my boss.
"What the hell are you doing? Get your ass to work."
I blinked. What? It's Sunday. And then something clicked. Aha! I am dreaming. Finally. And just like that, something inside me snapped. 3 days of missed revenge fantasies had piled up. This time, I was going to go all out. I did something I never done before. I slipped a kitchen knife into my bag and I headed to the office. As soon as I walked in, my boss was already yelling. His voice echoed through the room, shrill and furious. I just stood there grinning. Let the dog bark, I thought. He got more and more agitated. I was loving it. Then, at the perfect moment, I snapped back. I shouted right back at him, and I punched him hard. Gasps rippled across the floor. All eyes were on me. The feeling? Pure release. But I wasn't finished. I went into my bag and I pulled out the knife, and I drove it into him over and over again. I shouted, "I'll kill you!" And I just kept going and going. The feeling was dull, like cutting into raw chicken. And I remember thinking, I guess it is really like chicken. And the office exploded into chaos. People ran, screamed, scattered like ants. And I stood there, waiting to wake up. But I didn't. I changed clothes and I left the building and I wandered the streets, still in the dream. And eventually my stomach growled. That's weird, I thought. I've never been hungry in a lucid dream before. Just to test it, I went to a ramen shop and ordered. I ate. Everything felt real. Too real. I started to panic. If this was a dream, then doing something impossible like going somewhere that I'd never been should snap me out of it. So I headed to the station and I bought a ticket on a train I'd almost never used, the Jawman line. Even after boarding some limited express train I'd never seen before, I didn't wake up. I passed through Kashiwa, a place I'd visited before, and I kept going. No change. I eventually got off in Mito, a city I didn't know at all, and still, I didn't wake up. That's when I really realized that I might have killed someone. Actually killed someone. Maybe I'd always known, but something in me refused to admit it. Panicking, half crying, I jumped on another train and headed north. At some point, I lost track of time, and I came to sitting on a worn-out 2-car train, the kind with frayed seats and cracked windows. There were only a few old folks on board. Outside was pitch black. The train stopped at a station. Izumigamori, I think that's what it was called. The conductor walked straight up to me, even though I hadn't moved. "Get off here," he said. I figured I was about to be arrested or something, so I stepped off. The platform was old, broken, lit only by a flickering streetlight. I looked back at the conductor. His face was blurred, impossible to make out. He told me, "When you leave the station, go uphill. When you see a shrine, go inside, then follow what comes next." I couldn't think anymore, or maybe I didn't want to, so I obeyed. I left the station. The town outside looked like any other rural village, but there were no lights on in any house, no sign of life, only street lamps glowing in the dark. I followed the road upward. Eventually I saw the shrine. It was quiet. Beautiful, in fact. I remember there was a perfectly clear pond in the middle, and the full moon mirrored on its surface like glass. At the center of the pond was a small shrine building, and a priest waiting in front of it. "We've been expecting you," he said, and gestured for me to sit. He handed me some foul-tasting drink and began to chant something. A sutra? I'm not sure. Time passed, the chanting continued. Eventually my body felt light, and my mind floated. The priest said, "Let yourself go. Let the feeling carry you." I did. Everything turned white. It was beautiful. And then I blacked out. And the next thing I knew, I was staring up at a ceiling I didn't recognize. My mum was there, and she was crying, saying my name. I was in hospital. Apparently I had collapsed from exhaustion on Wednesday night in my apartment. And when I didn't show up for work for 2 days, my boss came looking for me and found me. And he'd been at my bedside ever since. He'd never left. All those days I thought I had been working, the fights, the murder, the ramen, all of it had happened in a lucid dream. And Saturday, the day I thought I was being screamed at, he'd been calling my name, trying to wake me up. I cried when I realized that. Even after I recovered and went back to work, the dreams wouldn't stop. Worse, they started happening without that falling sensation, so I couldn't tell what was real anymore. And even if it was just a dream, the fact that I'd killed someone I potentially owed my life to left a scar inside of me that I couldn't heal. I couldn't really forgive myself. Even though he was as bad as he was, I wouldn't be here if he didn't act or check on me. Eventually I was diagnosed with severe depression, and I was hospitalized for a long time. I know this was long, and it probably sounds just like a bad dream or something, but here's the thing. I looked it up. Izumigamori Shrine is real. I've never been to Ibaraki in my life, but when I saw the pictures, it was exactly the place from my dream. The station, though, Izumigamori Station, does not exist. The nearest one is Omika Station, and it's a long walk away. But I want to visit there one day, but a part of me is terrified that if I do, something in my head will just snap. So for now, I'm gonna stay away. Still, if anyone from the area knows something about Izumigamori Shrine, I'd love to hear it. Sometimes I think if I hadn't followed that path at night, if I'd stayed on that train, I might not have come back. So I'm warning you, if you're thinking about trying lucid dreaming, don't. Just don't try it. Hi, Jay here. Izumigamori Shrine sounds interesting. And if you look at the screen now, here it is. I managed to track it down. Maybe one day I'll go there. Visit it in real life. Heiwa no Taki, or Heiwa Falls, located in the Nishi ward of Sapporo, Hokkaido, is a strikingly beautiful waterfall nested along the upper reaches of the Kotoni Hassamu River, with a drop of about 8 meters. It's a popular spot for nature walks, photography, and even religious training by local Nichiren Buddhist practitioners. Near the waterfall sits Taiheiwaji Kanondo Hall. But beyond its peaceful name, Heiwa, meaning peace, Heiwa Falls hides a darker legacy. It's one of Hokkaido's most infamous haunted locations. Heiwa Falls has been the site of numerous tragic accidents over the years. Local rumors speak of multiple suicides, some having jumped into the waterfall's basin, others having taken their own lives nearby in public restrooms, including by immolation or hanging. The presence of a cemetery close by only adds to the chilling atmosphere. Paranormal enthusiasts and thrill seekers frequently name Heiwa Falls as a must-see destination for ghost spot tours in the region. By day, Heiwa Falls is bright and welcoming, a picturesque location used even for dates and outdoor activities, but at night, its atmosphere takes a dramatic turn. The warmth vanishes, almost replaced by a suffocating sense of unease. The shift is so distinct that locals often warn against visiting after dark. Here are some ghostly encounters and first-hand testimonies. The Floating Woman in 1991. A chilling account from 1991 describes a man visiting the falls with a friend for a late-night courage test, or kimodameshi. Moments after arriving, the friend fled from the restroom, yelling for the car to be started. Once safe, he described seeing a woman floating and swaying mid-air. At the time, the witness couldn't make sense of it. Years later, he read about a hanging that had taken place near the same restroom and came to believe that the woman hadn't been floating. She had been hanging. The Unseen Player in 2000. Another tale recounts a night of can-kicking games after a visit to Heiwa Falls. During a game at a nearby park, a player made eye contact with a friend to go kick the can, but the friend didn't follow. When confronted, the friend responded, "I got caught right at the start. You were the last one left." The question remained, who had made eye contact and played beside him? Did we bring something back from Heiwa Falls? They later joked half seriously. Whispering in the Toilet from 2018. One of the most frequently recounted locations near Heiwa Falls is the public restroom. In one tale, a young man entered the toilet for a prank, but when he didn't respond for over 20 minutes, friends grew worried. He eventually emerged crying, saying he'd experienced sleep paralysis. Through the gap at the bottom of the stall, he had seen someone's feet slide in. Paralyzed, he heard a voice whisper in his ear, "Don't kill, don't kill," over and over. He later apologized deeply to his friends. "Never mess around in haunted places," he warned as a parting note. There's also a local belief that if you smell burning inside the restroom, particularly a scorched, unnatural scent, it's a sign that a spirit is near. Message from a Dream, circa early 2000s. A man recounts visiting Heiwa Falls one weekend after getting his driver's license. When he and his friends arrived at the parking lot and began heading into the falls, his phone rang. It was his mother, furious. She explained that she'd just had a terrible dream. His grandfather on his father's side had apparently appeared, angrily scowling at her. The dream left her deeply unsettled. Later, the man discovered that the area surrounding the falls includes a memorial to Koreans who died during forced labor in Japan's early industrial era. To his surprise, he learned that his grandfather was of Korean descent. The incident left him with a feeling of eerie connection. Possession and the Locked Stall, 2017. Another harrowing experience. 3 friends visited Heiwa Falls around 1 a.m. One friend, said to be spiritually sensitive, suddenly screamed and attacked another, only later to claim that he had no memory of the event. They visited the restroom where a known self-immolation had occurred. There, The sensitive friend locked himself inside and wouldn't respond for 30 minutes. Meanwhile, another friend began crying uncontrollably by the falls. When the third friend finally emerged, he looked pale and shaken. He later described hearing a woman cry, "Don't kill my daughter," and seeing feet appear beneath the bathroom stall. He was frozen in place by an oppressive heat, as if the air itself had turned on him. The flickering car. One experience involved a group of friends preparing to venture deeper into the woods near the falls after parking. As they discussed their route, the interior lights in their car, which had been switched on, abruptly shut off without anyone touching them. Startled, the group immediately turned back. It was a reminder that sometimes even nature itself seems to warn visitors away. The woman on the roof. One group of junior high school boys once made a midnight pilgrimage to Heiwa Falls, ignoring the usual local warnings about visiting in odd-numbered groups. As they walked along the 3-kilometer road towards the site, streetlights flickered and dimmed exactly as they passed under them, only to illuminate again once they moved on. Then one boy pointed towards an abandoned car. 3 of them screamed. A pale woman stood silently on the roof. Though one boy didn't see her, the others were visibly shaken. The white-faced woman in the window. Closer to the falls, another boy spotted a woman staring at him from within a prefabricated storage shed. She was pale, with tangled black hair, watching him intently. Even after this, the boys, now terrified, continued to the falls. The spirit by the basin. Reaching the basin of the falls, they descended down a narrow stairway into complete darkness. There they saw a woman with long black hair standing across the river. Her face was either featureless or so horrifying that they couldn't remember it. In their panic, the boys screamed again and ran. On the way back, they forgot all about the woman on the roof, the shed, and everything else. It wasn't until later that they learned the burned soot inside the restroom they had explored came from a man's recent self-immolation. They also found out that a decomposed body had been discovered on the same path they had taken into the falls. Despite, or perhaps because of, its ghostly reputation, Heiwa Falls remains a destination that blends reverence with fears. The nearby Kanondo Hall suggests that the area is not only a site of trauma, but one of also spiritual protection. Visitors are advised to act with respect and avoid mockery or reckless behavior. Locals insist that disrespect in such places invites misfortune. Heiwa Falls is a place of natural beauty layered with spiritual weight. The cascade of water is accompanied by a cascade of voices, some whispered, some remembered, with documented suicides, eerie sightings, and a possible history buried under sorrow tied to wartime labor and displacement. This waterfall earns its place among Japan's most haunting locations. Have you ever heard of the prayer to open the door to the realm of the dead? You're supposed to do it at 2 a.m. by placing a mirror upright on a table, one lit candle on each side. Prepare 2 cups on the left side of the mirror, one filled with water, and on the right one filled with sake. In front of the mirror, place 4 small stones, 2 picked up from the western side of your house and 2 picked up from the eastern side. Then sit directly in front of the mirror, so your reflection is centered. Clasp your hands in front of your chest, close your eyes, and repeat the following sequence 14 times. The full name of the person you want to summon, the date of their death, your own full name, and the full address of the place where you're performing the prayer. And when you open your eyes, it's said that the deceased will appear in the mirror. But they say the ritual only works if the person you're calling had a personal connection to you. Blood relation, friendship, romance. Without that bond, it won't work, or rather, it shouldn't. I first heard about this ritual from a close friend of mine back in university. I asked him, "Have you ever tried it yourself?" And he shook his head and said, "Nah, even if there is someone I want to see again, if they appeared to me in some mirror in the middle of the night, that would freak me out too much." I mean, he had a point. There were people I missed, for sure, my grandma, my uncle, just to name a couple. But the idea of them suddenly showing up in a mirror like that? Yeah, no, I never tried it. Fast forward a few years, I was working in product development at a Tokyo firm, swamped with deadlines. I was on the final stretch of one of the biggest projects I was a part of since joining the company. One night I went out for drinks with someone from a partner company we'd been collaborating with, Mr. Takagi. He was 2 years older than me. We spoke all the time on the phone, and we had regular meetings, but this was our first time hanging out in person, and I actually was looking forward to it. The first izakaya was all business talk. By the time we got to the second one, we were relaxed, trading stories about hobbies, travel, relationships. "So, Takagi-san, no plans to get married?" "Nah, not at all. I don't even have a girlfriend right now. You seem like you'd be super popular. Are you sure you're not secretly dating anyone? Huh?" I meant it as a compliment, a joke, but he didn't laugh. He just sat there, and after a long pause, he said, "There was someone I loved deeply." "Yeah?" I said. "Yeah, she died 3 years ago." "Oh, wait, what happened? Was it an accident?" "No, she took her own life. And since then, I haven't felt like dating anyone, just, I haven't had the heart for it." "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to bring up something so personal." "No, it's fine, honestly, don't worry. I keep telling myself I need to move on someday." He sat there beside me, staring down the counter, with this distant look, and that old ritual came back to me, the prayer to open the door to the realm of the dead. "Takagi-san, if you had the chance, would you want to see her again?" He turned sharply. Of course I would." "What do you mean if I could? What are you saying? Why? Do you know some kind of way?" There was a weird tension in his voice, half hope, half something else. I laughed it off nervously. You know what, no, nothing like that. It's just, back in college, someone told me about this creepy ritual, said that you could see someone who died, actually. I told him the instructions, lightheartedly. Beers had been flowing, of course. It was just meant to sound like a spooky story. But instead of laughing, Takagi-san just pulled out his phone and started writing everything I said down. And watching him do that gave me this off feeling, It was like passing him a key to a locked room that I didn't realize at the time was sealed for a reason. Monday morning came. I walked into the office right on time, and I was immediately surrounded by my team leads. They looked pale, serious. "Shun, you went drinking with Takagi-san Friday night, right?" Yeah, I did, yeah. Is something wrong?" "He's dead." I felt my mouth go dry. "What?" His manager called first thing in the morning. They found him in his apartment. He hanged himself. "When?" "Well, early Saturday morning, apparently. They discovered him around midday Sunday." Someone else added, "What time did you two part ways?" "Just before the last train home of the night, I think. Maybe around midnight." "Alright, well, you've been asked to visit his company today. I'll be going with you. The police are involved. Don't panic, but they are treating it as a suicide. They just want to get a clear picture of what happened that night, okay?" I was still processing it when we got in the taxi. We arrived at his company in Asakusa, where his manager led us to a reception room. 2 detectives in plain clothes, 2 uniformed police officers were already inside. They asked us questions in a calm, formal tone. What was Takagi-san like? What did he talk about that night? And had I ever seen signs that there was something wrong? Well, I answered everything as truthfully as I could. I told them about the ex-girlfriend, how she took herself out of this world. But I left out the ritual I told him about. I knew deep down I pushed him towards something. I could just feel it, and I couldn't bring myself to admit it. After nearly an hour of questioning, one of the detectives said, "Thank you for your time. That will be all." The four of them stood up and started to leave, but just before stepping out, one turned back to me and said, "Hey, did Takagi-san ever mention any religious beliefs? You know, a group or a practice or something?" "No, not that I know of. Why do you ask?" "Oh, it's nothing, never mind, thank you." And then he left, and with the cops gone, the mood lightened slightly. Takagi-san's supervisor came over and gave us a tired bow and said, "Sorry you had to go through this." And we started chatting casually, and I asked, "Say, that detective's question about religion, what was that about?" And he chuckled dryly and said, "Apparently his kotatsu was covered in weird stuff, you know, candles, sake cups, a mirror. It looks like he was setting up some kind of ritual." I couldn't respond. He'd really done it. And whatever he saw pushed him over the edge. Then the supervisor looked at me curiously. "He told you he had a girlfriend, right? Did he say about the way she passed on?" "Yeah, he did actually." "Well, you know that's not true, right?" "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, he never had a girlfriend. I was his direct manager for 5 years and never once heard about a real relationship." "What do you mean a real relationship?" "He was obsessed. You know, unhealthily obsessed with this idol. You know her name? KK, right? That TV personality who passed away a few years ago." My boss and I nodded, vaguely recalling that name. I do remember some idol called KK, some media star. That's who he meant. That's who he thought was his girlfriend. Remember, KK took her own life too. And the police said his apartment walls were covered, literally covered, with her posters. There was more, but honestly, I stopped listening at that point, because in that moment I remembered something my friend said when first telling me about the ritual. The person you call has to be someone you know, family, a friend, a lover, someone you had a real connection with. What if it's someone you never actually met? I asked. Back then. Then it's dangerous, 'cause you won't be summoning them. It's been years now. Sometimes I think about doing that ritual actually. Calling Takagi-san. This time, asking him what happened that night, what he saw. But I can't. I can't do that. I'm scared of who or what might answer. Apparently, at Takagi-san's apartment, there was one final note, scrawled on paper, difficult to read. And this version includes some interpretation. "I'm so happy. You finally came. You really came to me, at last. And now we can be together forever. But KK, what's wrong with your face? Your eyes, why are they popping out like that?" This story is something that happened to me when I was very young, and to this day it remains one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. At the time I was still in elementary school, living in a tiny forgettable apartment with my mother, my older sister, and my younger sister. It was the kind of place you'd pass by and never give a second glance, just another aging residential block tucked away on a quiet street. At night we all slept together in the tatami room, our pillows lined up in a row. It felt safe that way, warm, simple, and ordinary. That night, though, something shifted. My mother had come down with a bad cold. She asked me to turn off the lights around the apartment before bed. I went from room to room, flipping switches in the bathroom, the kitchen, and then the living room, until the whole place was sunk into quiet darkness. The only glow came from the streetlights slipping through the gaps in the curtains. Once I finished, I returned to the tatami room and let my mother know that everything was off. I climbed into my futon beside my already sleeping younger sister, but despite the early hour, I couldn't sleep. The silence felt too heavy. I just lay there staring up at the ceiling, letting my mind wander. And then, out of nowhere, I heard it. A strange metallic tapping sound echoed through the stillness. I sat upright, heart suddenly alert, and I scanned the room. There was nothing but total darkness, just the shape of my sister curled beside me, the gentle rise and fall of her breathing, nothing out of place. But again, I heard it. This time it sounded clearer, like it came from the direction of the living room. My older sister, who had been lying silently nearby, whispered, "Did you hear that just now?" So I wasn't imagining it. We both sat there listening. The sound was faint but undeniable. The metallic clinking, like iron tapping on some stone or wood, something deliberate, something near. We carefully looked around the tatami room again. Our mother and younger sister were still fast asleep. No one else, nothing that could have made that noise, but it had been real. "I'm gonna check the living room," my sister said. I didn't want her to go alone, so I followed. Together we crept through the darkness and peeked into the living room from the hallway. Staying so close to the kitchen wall, the room was silent and unlit. The faint blue-gray light from outside, casting soft shadows across the floor. And that's when we saw something. Right there, in the middle of the room. On top of the table where we always ate dinner, laughed, played cards. Someone was sitting. A person, seated perfectly on the tabletop. She had her back to us. Long, black hair reached down to her waist. Her frame was slight, and she wore what looked like a white yukata, loose and pale against the gloom. Even from behind, we could tell it was a woman. I looked over at my sister. She hadn't moved. Her eyes were fixed on the figure, her mouth slightly open. I couldn't tell if she was scared, stunned, or something else entirely. The woman on the table sat upright, her spine impossibly straight. She didn't move, not even a twitch. She just sat there, facing away, her white-clad back glowing faintly in the half-darkness. I remember thinking, if she turns around, we're done. Something primal told me not to speak, not to breathe too loud, and that any sudden movement would break whatever thin barrier kept her from noticing us. And yet I couldn't take it. My fear cracked into panic, and without warning, I screamed. Something wordless and raw, and I ran. I tore back into the tatami room, shaking my mother awake and yelling, "There's someone in the living room." She blinked at me, confused, half asleep. "What are you talking about? It's the middle of the night." But I wouldn't let it go. I dragged her up, I pulled her by the arm, and I brought her into the living room. She turned the light on, and the woman was gone. The table was empty, clean, nothing there. No sign that anything had been disturbed. But standing next to the table was my sister, and the look on her face, oh, I'll never forget it. She wasn't scared, not exactly. She looked hollow, like something had been scooped out of her. Her eyes were vacant, locked on the tabletop, like she was still seeing the woman sitting there. When our mother asked what had happened, she just said, "There was a woman sitting here." My mother stared at the table confused and sighed. "All right, back to bed." we returned to the tatami room, but I couldn't stop thinking, how long had my sister been there alone? Had she watched that thing the whole time I was gone? Had that woman finally turned around? I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, as soon as I had the chance, I asked my sister about it. Hey, about last night. She didn't respond. She just looked down, saying nothing. I pressed again. I needed to know. Finally, in a barely audible voice, she whispered, "It's because you screamed." After that, something changed between us. She became cold, distant. She'd always responded brightly when I talked to her before, but now, nothing. She started ignoring me more and more, and no matter how many times I brought up that night, she never said another word about it. But I understood. That scream I let out, the one that shattered the silence, I was certain it had made that woman turn around, and my sister, she had seen her face. Whatever she saw must have been terrifying beyond words, so terrifying that she couldn't bring herself to talk about it ever again. Time passed, and slowly the memory of that night faded into the background of our lives, I guess. I moved to middle school and entered the grind of exam season. I was spending more and more time alone studying in my own room late into the night. My sister had gone off to high school in another prefecture and was living in a dorm. She hardly came home anymore. One night, I was hunched over my desk, working through a problem set, when I heard something. Not quite a knock, just a sound. It was quiet, subtle, but unmistakable. A metallic sound, just like back then, and the blood in my body turned to ice. Again, that same noise right outside my door. My heart was pounding, my hands were cold and clammy, and I was suddenly aware of how alone I was in the house. My mum had started going to bed early lately, my older sister was long gone, and my younger sister, she must have been sound asleep. It was basically just me. And that sound. I realized, slowly, horribly, exactly where it was coming from. I crept to the door and opened it just a crack. Across the hallway, the living room sat in still darkness, faintly lit by the bluish light seeping in through the curtains. I peeked in, and there she was, sitting on the table, just like before. The white yukata, the impossibly straight back, her long, black hair hanging down her spine. She hadn't changed at all. I felt the memory slam into me, the fear, the helplessness, the cold terror I thought I had buried. And then, this time I saw her do it. I saw the source of the sound, and it came from her. I couldn't help it. I made a noise. I don't even remember what I said, but the moment the sound escaped my mouth, she turned around and she looked right at me. And her face, oh God, her face. Both of her eyes had iron nails driven into them, thick rusted nails perfectly embedded into each socket as if they belonged there. In her hands she gripped what looked like iron rods or clubs, and she smiled with just her mouth. No expression in her eyes, obviously, no emotion, just that twisted, silent grin.
You and your whole family are finished.
The next day I woke up in my bed. My memory came rushing back all at once. The woman, the nails in her eyes, the metal rods in her hands, the awful words she said. I asked my mum, "Hey, did you carry me to bed last night?" She just looked confused and said, "What are you talking about?" But I knew what I'd seen. I had blacked out near the living room. I should have been lying there when morning came. So who moved me? No matter how hard I tried to recall what happened after I lost consciousness, my mind went blank, except one thing. That face, that awful smile, those words.
You and your whole family are finished.
The first sign that something was wrong came later, that same day. I came home from school around evening, unlocked the front door, and I stepped inside. The apartment was dead quiet. The lights in the living room were off. Weird. Normally Mum would be in the kitchen by now making dinner. "Mom?" I called out. No response, no sound at all. The door was unlocked. So she was probably just out shopping, right? She was always kind of forgetful like that. I figured it was nothing, so I slipped off my shoes. That sound from the living room. It hit me like a slap to the face. My whole body stiffened. That same metal on metal clink from years ago, from last night. It shouldn't be here. I needed to run. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to get out. I turned and slammed the door open and tore down the apartment stairs like I was running for my life. My thoughts were racing. Where was Mum? Had that thing done something to her? I ran down the streets, completely losing track of where I was heading until I found myself outside a local supermarket. Maybe she's just in here, I mumbled to myself, trying to calm myself down. It was late, and the store was mostly empty, just a few other shoppers. Normal, calm, but my heart wouldn't slow down. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had just seen, that dark room, that sound, the table. I had to be sure. I needed to know what was going on back at home. There was a public phone near the side of the store. I dug out some change, slid it in the coin slot, and with shaking fingers punched the number to our house. The ringing echoed in my ears. Trapped alone in that booth, once, twice, 3 times. Click. Someone picked up. "Hey, who's this?" It was my mum. Her voice was calm, gentle, familiar. "Mum?" I asked, cautiously.
Oh, there you are. You're out late. What's going on?
My blood ran cold again. There's only one phone in our house, and it's in the living room. And the thing I saw in the living room earlier, that wasn't my mum. "Why are you answering the phone?" I asked. My voice was trembling.
What do you mean? You're acting strange. Are you okay?
No, this wasn't right. She was acting like she'd been there the whole time, like nothing happened, like she had been the one sitting in the dark when I came home. "Who are you?" I whispered, without thought. Then a pause. And then the other voice on the line said,
I'm your mother.
Almost 8 years passed after the night I saw her again. 8 years since I heard that voice on the phone. Nothing happened in that time, no accidents, no illnesses, just silence. I started to believe, maybe, it had been some awful dream. The curse she spoke of, you and your whole family are finished, that hadn't come true. We'd moved on with our lives. My sister got into a university in the next prefecture. Dad was still working away from home. He was transferred all across the country. I lived alone while attending college in the neighboring prefecture too. Only Mum and my younger sister still lived in the old apartment. Every year, Mum would call me during the holidays and ask me to come back. I always said no. No matter how normal everything seemed, I couldn't bear to go back to that place, back to that living room, back to the table where she had once sat. This year, though, was different. Dad, my younger sister Mika, and my older sister were both coming home for New Year's, and Mum, sounding more forceful than usual, insisted I join too. Reluctantly, I agreed. The truth, I wasn't scared of the house itself. I was scared of seeing my mum again. Because deep down, I never forgot that moment on the phone when I spoke with something that sounded like her. When I returned home, everyone greeted me like nothing had changed. Graduating soon? Got a girlfriend yet? You're thinner than last time. Yeah, they were all just like I remembered. Mum looked cheerful too, even busy with a new part-time job cleaning hotel rooms. Even my older sister, who'd ignored me for years, was there, quiet but present. I couldn't bring myself to talk to her though. Ever since that night 8 years ago, she had barely looked at me. She never forgave me for that screaming, for making that woman turn her head. I thought that maybe we'd stay like that forever. But then something impossible happened. She turned to me, her voice low, almost apologetic, and said, "Sorry I ignored you all this time, bro." I couldn't believe it. 8 years of silence, suddenly broken. Hey, I'm sorry too, but why now? Did something happen? She looked hesitant, then invited me into our old shared bedroom. We sat down like we were kids again, and then she told me, "I heard it again. You know, that sound." Just hearing her say that made my whole body tense up. She continued, "I got home from work around 9 p.m. and I was watching TV, just relaxing, and then, from the bathroom, I heard it. That same metallic sound from when we were kids. I panicked. I knew what it was. I ran straight to a co-worker's place nearby and I stayed the night there. While I was telling her about it, we heard it again though. From the bathroom. She heard it too. That's when we called the police. And we checked the apartment, but they found nothing. But hearing that sound again pulled everything from the past back into focus, like it had just happened yesterday. The dark room, the woman on the table, the way she turned, her face. That sound had haunted my dreams for years, so much so that I couldn't listen to music with cowbells or chimes. I flinched every time a pan clanked in the kitchen. Even railroad crossings made my skin crawl. But something was different about my sister's story. She hadn't seen the woman. She hadn't heard the voice, just the sound. And this time it came from the bathroom. Was it really her? I was about to ask when my sister suddenly started crying. Big heavy tears. I rushed to comfort her, but she looked at me trembling with something beyond fear. "You haven't heard about Mum from Mika, have you?" "Mika, our younger sister." I shook my head. "I just had dinner with her and Mum, and everything seemed normal." My sister wiped her eyes and then looked at me in the eye. "She's been going out at night, alone." My stomach dropped. After hearing that from my sister, I couldn't sit still. I went straight to Mika's room. She looked up as I opened the door. "Did Onye-chan tell you?" I nodded. "Is it true? Mum's been going out? At night?" Mika didn't even blink. "Yeah." "You want to see for yourself?" That night, I lay on a futon next to her bed, and we both stared up at the ceiling, barely talking. Time crawled. The longer we waited, the heavier the silence became. Mika had it all timed out. She usually goes out about 1. She's back after about 10 minutes. At first, she hadn't thought much of it. Maybe Mum just needed the air. Maybe she was stepping out to smoke secretly. It wasn't that strange until winter came, and even in freezing snow, she left. Mika asked Mum about it once, and she just looked puzzled and said, "What are you talking about?" Not pretending, not brushing it off. Mum genuinely didn't know what she was talking about. And that's when Mika got scared, so she followed her. "It's almost time," Mika whispered, eyes flicking towards the hallway. And then we heard something. A faint rustling sound outside the room. Shuffle, shuffle. By the front door, boots being slipped on. A soft click as the latch turned. The front door was opened and then closed. Her mum was gone. We scrambled out of bed and padded quietly to the entrance. The door was unlocked. Mika slowly turned the knob and eased it open. Cold air rushed in. Outside, under the dim light of the street lamp, we saw her, just a short distance away. Oh, Mum. She wasn't walking away. Down the road, she was right there, next to the utility pole, in front of the house. Turning over and over again, not strolling, not pacing, She was just running in circles, frantically, like something was chasing her, in her own orbit, over and over and over and over again, around the same pole. Her face, even from a distance, wasn't the gentle one we knew or grew up with. Not anymore. It was twisted, furious, blank-eyed, demonic. A mask of pure rage. My knees locked, my breath caught. Mika leaned in close and whispered, "She does that every time. For about 10 minutes. I couldn't take my eyes off of her. My mom. I couldn't look away. And in my mind, faint but clear as anything, echoed the words from 8 years ago.
You and your whole family are finished.
Back inside, I was the first to return. Mika came a moment later. I tried to compose myself, fumbling in the dark for the light switch to the living room, and I felt that familiar plastic nub, and at that moment, the sound rang out. Not distant, not faint. Right there, in the living room. I flipped the light switch by reflex. White light flooded into the room. White light flooded the room. My eyes squinted, adjusting, then widening. She was there. Sitting on the table, again wearing the same white yukata. Back facing me, everything in the room felt off. The air was heavier than it should be, shadows too long, angles too sharp. I couldn't tell if my legs were shaking or just refusing to move. How long I stood there, I don't know, but I reached out again, and I turned the light off. Darkness swallowed the room, and from the front door I heard the sound. Clack. Someone coming in. That should be Mika, right? But something stopped me from looking. I knew she was behind me. Yet, I couldn't turn around. I couldn't lift my head. I heard creaking on the wooden floor behind me, footsteps slowly getting closer, and I realized it wasn't my younger sister Mika. It wasn't anyone I wanted to see. That pressure, like something monstrous, was getting closer, close enough to reach out, and then it came from right behind me, my vision blurred, and then something grabbed my shoulder, hard, and I don't remember what happened after that. I woke up the next morning in my sister's room. She said she found me asleep there. Neither she nor Mika had touched my shoulder, and when Mika got home, Mum still hadn't returned. Whatever was happening to Mum, whatever was inside her now, it wasn't just mental illness. It wasn't something we could explain or ignore away. Mika told me, "We've already tried everything. Psychiatric help, even a priest came to bless this place. Nothing works. Mum's been reported by the neighbors more than once. She had been trying to protect me," she said, "and my sister had been working behind the scenes too, without even telling Dad. All of it wasted. Because this wasn't just about Mum. This thing that had crept into our lives wasn't done yet, and that night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing her in my mind's eye, this woman in the white yukata, sitting cross-legged on the table, her back facing me, motionless, her shoulders too still, her presence too heavy, and that sound. It came from nowhere, but it was always close, and then the voice etched in my skull.
You and your family are finished.
I remember thinking, maybe it started with me, maybe I was the one who invited it in. The first time I saw her, I was the one who screamed, right? I was the one who broke the silence. Maybe, just maybe, it was all my fault. The next evening, we all tried to act normal, like it was kind of like the calm before a storm. My father had returned, my sister, mother, and Mika were all under one roof. But the air felt heavy, tense. We couldn't ignore what was happening anymore. Even Dad, who had always been the rational one, looked shaken when he heard what was going on. And that night I stayed in the living room alone, despite my fears. I didn't want to, but something inside me told me I needed to do it, almost like I had to. Midnight passed, silence, then came the sound. Clear, sharp, metallic. I turned slowly. She was there, on the table again. Same posture, same white clothes, same unblinking stillness. But this time she turned, and I saw her face again, eyes impaled with those thick iron nails, bloodless, smiling, not with joy but with malice. She held 2 heavy iron tools in her hands. It kind of looked to me like mallets or hammers, and then her lips curled upwards.
It's time now. You all belong to me.
I don't remember what happened after that. Just a scream, then darkness. And when I woke up, I was back in my bed, alone. After that night, I started keeping a journal. Every little detail I could recall, I wrote down. Because the memories would get fuzzy, like something was deliberately trying to make me forget, like a fog settling over the worst parts. And my mum, she had started to change. At first it was subtle. Her voice would sound slightly too cheerful, even when nothing was funny. Then came the late night walks again. She stopped responding to her name at times. We'd have to say it over and over and over again until she blinked, like coming out of some kind of trance. Mika and I started staying in the same room every night. We slept with the lights on. The sound stopped for a while. Weeks passed without a kang. No woman on the table, no missing memories. But it was a false calm. Like the calm before a storm. One night, while brushing my teeth, I looked in the mirror, and I felt that something was wrong. My reflection blinked a second after I did. Just a beat late, you know. I leaned in as my reflection smiled, but I didn't smile. I dropped the toothbrush, staggered backwards. I raced back to my bedroom, slamming the door shut and locking it. And then there was no sound, no knocking, no words. But then came the sound of something dragging slowly across the floor. Drag, and then that. Once, twice, then silence. After that, I begged our dad to let us all leave, to move out, to go anywhere. But every time we talked about leaving the apartment, something bad happened. Mika got sick. My dad missed a crucial work call. My sister had a minor car accident on her way to work. Almost like the apartment wanted us to stay there. Or something inside did. And that's when Mika said it out loud. Maybe it's not the apartment, maybe it's us. Maybe it followed us. By the time I got back to the apartment ahead of my sister, I was too shaken to even consider sleep. It's hard to describe what happened next. My sisters and I, though none of us said it out loud, we began living as if we were waiting for something, waiting for her to appear again, waiting for the next kang. Every sound of the night, every echo of metal, every flicker of light in the darkened hallway, it made my heart race and my skin crawl. We didn't speak about it, but I'm sure we all felt it. My younger sister kept hearing footsteps at night, pacing the hallway. Not my mother's light shuffle or my sister's own echo, but heavier, deliberate steps, the kind that feel wrong in a family home at night. She stopped sleeping in her room. She kept her phone's flashlight on at night, clutching it like a talisman. One day she came into my room without knocking and asked quietly, "Do you think if we leave this place, she'll stop?" I knew what she meant. The woman in the white yukata. The one who had first appeared when we were children. The one who spoke through the phone in our mother's voice. The one whose eyes held iron spikes like rusted nails, pounded into her soul. And the one now, years later, who had hollowed out our mother from the inside, worn her like skin and made her walk in circles under streetlight, like a broken puppet. And I remember what she had said.
You and your whole family are finished.
And somehow, I knew she wasn't lying. We didn't talk to Mum about it. Not anymore. She was different now. Sometimes she was bright and warm, just like always. Other times she'd forget things, simple things, you know. She'd boil water, forget the pot was on the stove. She'd stare into an empty corner of the room for minutes, unblinking. Once I caught her muttering under her breath, in a voice that wasn't hers. It was too deep and too cold to be hers. And the worst part, when I looked her in the eye, I didn't always recognize her. It was like someone was borrowing her face, pretending to be her. And we tried everything. Spiritual consultations. A Buddhist monk came, we burned incense and chanted for nearly an hour. Afterwards, he told us quietly, with a troubled face, "This presence is old, deeply rooted, and it's not something I can remove. It isn't just in your home, it's with you." And that night I had a nightmare. In it I was back in the living room again. The table was still there, so was she. Still in that white yukata, still seated, still motionless, only this time there were no more spikes in her eyes. There were holes, deep black holes where her eyes used to be, and they were watching me. It's been nearly a year since then. We moved, finally. We live in a completely different city, a new apartment, new furniture. We even stopped using low-down tables, just in case. But even now, in quiet moments, especially at night, I sometimes hear it again. Somewhere faintly behind the walls, beneath the floor. Not loud. Just loud enough to let me know she's still there. Watching. Waiting. And the sad fact is, there's nothing I can do about it. It happened about 3 years ago. At the time I was in my final year of university, with graduation looming ahead. My days were consumed with job hunting and working on my thesis. Non-stop pressure and stress. By the time summer break came around, I decided I needed a change of pace. I packed up and headed out alone for a road trip across the Tohoku region. Traveling by car meant that I had complete freedom. No strict plans, just driving wherever I felt like, stopping when I saw something interesting, or pulling over to take a nap if I got tired. It was supposed to be an easygoing, soul-cleansing kind of trip. The first day, I drove straight north through Tohoku and ended up sleeping in a parking lot of a convenience store along a national highway in Aomori. The next day, I wandered into town. I saw the Nebuta floats, large, brightly illuminated lantern floats. Strolled across the shopping arcade, picked up some souvenirs, that sort of thing. But it was the second night when things changed. I had crossed into Akita Prefecture, driving along a rural highway. It was already pitch dark outside, and the digital clock on my dashboard showed just after 10 p.m. The radio started crackling with static. Thick, distorted, almost like something was breathing through it. I shut it off and checked the GPS instead, hoping to get my bearings. But of course I didn't recognize a single place name on the screen. "Where the hell am I?" I mumbled, uneasy but trying to stay calm. I kept following the national route, heading south, using the blue road signs and GPS as my guide. Then I noticed a narrow mountain road veering off to the left. It was ridiculously thin and snaked up into forested hills. I don't know why, but something made me want to check it out. Maybe it was the curiosity of being somewhere unknown, or something deeper. Even though I felt a vague sense of unease, I turned the wheel and entered the path. Almost immediately, the asphalt gave way to gravel. The tires crunched loudly in the silence. Other than the beam of my headlights, there was no light anywhere. Not a glimmer from the sky, not a distant house or a street lamp. I told myself I'd just go far enough to look for a spot to turn around. I didn't want to mess up my tires, so I crept forward, looking for a patch of open ground. That's when I saw it. A small rotting shack just up ahead, barely illuminated by my headlights. It wasn't a house, it was more like an abandoned storage shed that had been forgotten for years. The wooden walls were splintered and peeling, half collapsed in places, and the whole thing looked like it could cave in at any moment. From the outside it looked maybe 6 or 7 tatami mats in size, tiny. But the moment I saw it, I felt it in my gut. Something was wrong. Very wrong. It was the kind of structure that radiated unease, like it had absorbed every terrible thing that had ever happened inside. It was just the kind of vibe it gave off. Thankfully, there was just enough space on the edge of the road to do a 3-point turn. I eased the car back carefully, trying not to let my imagination get the best of me. And then, I heard something, a sudden unnatural sound, which came from the direction of the shack. It was like chunks of wood slamming against each other, not in a rhythm, but in chaotic collisions. A chill shot straight down my spine. At first I thought maybe something had toppled over naturally. Maybe an old plank leaning against a wall had fallen. But no, this wasn't accidental. It sounded too deliberate. Like something was moving around inside, bumping into things, disturbing the interior. I looked down and there was nothing but darkness and trees. No wind, no animals, just the shack, standing there like it was waiting for me. My hands moved faster now, trying to complete the U-turn. I was sweating. My pulse was hammering. Then, without meaning to, my eyes drifted towards the shack again. And that's when I saw something black. It was coming out of the shack. It crawled, or maybe crept, just barely stepping out of the ruined doorway. Its entire body was covered in a long, matted, jet-black fur. It wasn't a bear, it wasn't a dog. It looked vaguely human in shape, like one of those old illustrations of a Yamabito, a mountain man from folklore, or maybe a yeti, or Hibagon, Japan's own rumored cryptid, the anthropoid ape anomaly. But this thing was small, child-sized, maybe the height of an elementary school kid. Its face was obscured, covered in hair. I couldn't see eyes, nose, or a mouth. Still, my gut told me everything I needed to know. That thing was dangerous. Not in the way a wild animal is dangerous, but in a way that said if it so much noticed me, something would break inside me, something I wouldn't be able to fix. My entire body locked up, trembling so hard it felt like my bones were vibrating. And then the tears started, just pouring down my face like a flood. It didn't speak, it didn't make a sound, it just stood there. But the presence it gave off wasn't just malice, it was far beyond that, like it exuded something warped and cursed. As if it didn't belong to our world. I had to get out. I threw the car into gear and I gunned it. I don't remember anything after that. The next thing I knew, I was pulling into a self-service gas station in the neighboring prefecture. After that, I didn't stop again. I just drove and drove straight home without pause. When I got back and parked, I popped the trunk out of habit, just to make sure everything was where it should be. What I found in there made my blood freeze all over again. Scattered across the inside of the trunk were tiny dead winged insects. Dozens of them. And the car wash bucket I kept back there. There was a pool of thick, dirty, dark brown water. Filthy, like a runoff from a swamp. A few insects were still buzzing lazily over it, alive. But I hadn't been anywhere near water, not even close. And I hadn't opened the trunk once since I left for the trip. After that night, everything fell apart. At university, in the cafeteria, the soup looked like that brown water, and I couldn't bring myself to eat it. In lectures, I'd glance over and see my friends' arms crawling with winged insects, like a living coat. I had to take a break from my thesis. I started seeing a psychiatrist, got put on meds. Eventually I stabilized. The bugs in the brown water stopped appearing, but that black figure from the shack, that image still clings to my mind. Vivid as ever. What the hell was that thing? Was it just some freak accident? Or was it connected to the time about a month earlier when I visited a notoriously haunted location in the Tohoku region. Nothing happened back then, or so I thought. Either way, I swore to myself I'd never take a narrow mountain road again. And if you go somewhere for a test of courage, please be careful, because you never know what's waiting in the dark. Hi, Jay here. The creature described could be related to Yamabiko, as mentioned, echoing spirits. Yamabito, wild men of the mountains, or even an obscure form of Tsuchigumo, earth spiders that are said to live deep in remote forests. The odd size, human-like shape, and the overwhelming sense of spiritual pollution suggests something far beyond animal. Perhaps a forgotten yokai, guarding an abandoned shrine or cursed trail. Some urban legends spread like whispers, shared between kids on the playground, or half remembered by adults with a shiver. This one, it stayed close. It lived in our house. If you're a parent, or if you live near the woods, or if your child talks to someone you can't see, listen closely. Watch for the signs, because once Sacchan comes, it doesn't let go so easily. This happened about a year ago. My family and a couple of our friends went camping near a remote lake. We checked in around 1 p.m., set up our tents, and once everything was ready, the adults relaxed, while the kids ran off to play nearby. We told them not to wander far. It was a pretty open area, and not many other campers were around. Just us and 2 other groups. We figured it was safe enough. As evening approached, we started preparing dinner. Someone called out for the kids to come back, but when they did, our daughter, who was in 1st grade at the time, was missing. At first we assumed that she was just a few steps behind the others, but when we asked the kids, all they said was, "She was with us just a second ago." We searched everywhere, and I mean everywhere. It was unbelievably stressful. I was fearing the worst, thinking the worst thoughts possible. The campground wasn't that big. The view was open, and there weren't many places to hide. Still, we combed through every possible spot, over and over again, but she wasn't there. It was beyond terrifying. Even the campground manager looked shaken. "This has never happened before," he muttered, clearly disturbed. By now the sun had gone down. The darkness settled in, and a sick thought began to creep into all our minds. Oh God, what if she fell in the lake? We were about to contact the authorities when, out of nowhere, she came back. Just like that. She wandered out of the woods like nothing happened. We rushed to her, of course. We were crying, panicking, asking her where she'd been. She blinked and said matter-of-factly, "I was playing with Sacchan." Sacchan. That was the name of her imaginary friend. She'd been talking about Sacchan for a while, actually. At first we assumed Sacchan was just a made-up name she had given to one of her dolls, but no, it turned out she had named the doll after Sacchan, not the other way around. She said she and Sacchan played with dolls together. Sometimes the name would come up again out of nowhere. She'd mentioned Sacchan in passing, as if it was totally normal. And well, kids her age have vivid imaginations. We didn't think much of it. As long as it wasn't hurting anyone, we figured it was harmless. So that night we apologized to everyone for all the trouble that she had created and carried on with the rest of our camping trip. Our daughter was back, and that was all that mattered to us. After we got home, she seemed fine. She was her usual self, and though she'd still bring up Sacchan now and then, her real-life friends kept her busy. Gradually, she stopped talking about Sacchan altogether. Well, I felt a bit of relief. Maybe this meant she was outgrowing that phase, learning to focus more on the real world. Everything seemed normal again, until one day my son came running up to me and said, "Chan is playing with a man I don't know in her room." He was talking about his sister playing with a man. Instant panic. Was there someone in our house? I rushed upstairs. My heart was pounding, and I found my daughter alone in her room, sitting quietly, playing with her dolls. Was someone just in here? I asked, trying my best to sound calm. She looked up and said, "Oh, you mean Sacchan? He asked me to play, so I was playing with him just a minute ago." Sacchan is a man? Not a little girl? Not a doll? A man? And now, not only could she see him, but so could my son. It wasn't just her imagination. Was there someone actually sneaking into our house, potentially stalking our family? Had this been going on for years without us knowing? I felt like the worst parent in that moment. I tried to keep my voice steady, but inside I was panicking. I sat both kids down and told them firmly that they must never talk or play with this Sacchan again. Later that night, I told my husband what had happened. He frowned and said, "You know, I actually remember hearing a story like this, some urban legend from years back." He vaguely remembered something, some tale about a man only children could see, one of those Kuchisaki type stories. The kind that ends with, if a child follows him, they sometimes never come back. He couldn't remember the details, and neither could I, and we had no idea what to do next. But the unease stuck with me. The fear didn't go away. We went on with our days, but inside I was waiting for something to happen. And then something did. One night I woke up suddenly. I don't know why. No sound, just something felt off. It was dark. The living room was pitch black. And that's when I saw her, my daughter. She was sliding down the plastic slide we kept in the living room as part of the jungle gym we'd set up for the kids. She was doing it slowly, like she didn't want to make a sound. I was too stunned to call out. I just stared. But then I saw it. A shadow. Someone was next to her. A figure, too tall to be a child, too still to be real. A man, standing close, watching. My husband was asleep next to me. I knew that was Sacchan. My voice came out before I could stop it. "Come here, right now." My daughter, startled, and turned. She started walking towards me, but then the shadow grabbed her arm and began to pull her back into the dark. I shot out of bed, ran to her, and grabbed her with all my strength, and I pulled her. But the shadow wouldn't let go. It had more than one arm, maybe 5, 6. I couldn't scream. The terror was too deep. I just wrestled with it in silence, fighting back those cold, grasping limbs. Why didn't I scream for my husband? He was right there. But in that moment, he didn't exist. Nothing did, except that thing and my daughter. I couldn't look up. Something told me that if I saw Sacchan's face, that would be the end of it. But somehow, I broke free. I pulled her back to the futon. We stayed there shaking. The shadow didn't follow. It just stood there, watching. It might have lasted an hour, or maybe it was only 10 minutes. But eventually the feeling vanished, and the shadow disappeared into the darkness. Only then did I remember my husband. I shook him awake. He still thinks it was a dream, that we were both sleepwalking. Sometimes I have to wonder if he's right, but how could we have both imagined the same thing? And I'll never forget the feel of those hands, those unnatural many hands pulling at my child. That wasn't a dream. Since that night, Sacchan hasn't appeared to us again. Not to my daughter, not to any of us. And somehow, I know it won't come back. So if your child ever tells you about an imaginary friend named Sacchan, be careful. Watch the shadows. Check their room at night. And never, ever let them play alone in the dark with something only they can see. This isn't a ghost story, but it's something that still makes my skin crawl. When I was little, probably early elementary school, my younger sister was just a baby. She had pretty bad asthma, so my mum had to take her to the hospital, about an hour away, for treatment. Even though I wasn't sick, I often asked to go too. For a kid, just being out of the house was exciting enough, and sometimes we'd stop on the way home to get something to eat. My mum wasn't thrilled about taking me. She'd tell me to stay home because I was a bit of a pain, but I usually convinced her. While my sister was getting checked, I would wander around the hospital, exploring the wide, echoing halls like I was on an adventure. One day during one of these little adventures, a woman I didn't recognize suddenly spoke to me. "Would you like some candy, sweetie?" She was thin, frail looking. Her hair was mostly white, with some strands of black left. Her skin was pale, almost sickly, and her expression was drawn tight with exhaustion, like she hadn't slept in years. But what really made me nervous were her eyes. There was something intense in the way that she looked at me. She told me she was a patient at the hospital and had noticed me walking around before. She said she was lonely, and she asked if I would be her friend. I didn't know how to respond, and I was always told not to speak to strangers. I felt uneasy, but I was too scared to speak up, so I shook my head and quietly ran back to my mum. As I turned back once, I saw her following me, slowly shuffling down the hall in her slippers. When I spotted my mum holding my baby sister in the waiting room, I ran to her crying and pointed back and said, "There's a weird lady following me." The woman held up a handkerchief. My handkerchief. It had dinosaurs on it. It was unmistakably a little boy's hanky. And said, "You dropped this." My mum apologized and scolded me for being so rude. The old woman smiled faintly and stepped closer to my mum. Then suddenly her expression changed. Her mouth opened, like she'd seen a ghost. And tears welled up in her eyes, and she said, "You look just like my daughter." She said she'd lost her own daughter years ago due to an illness, and that my mother looked remarkably like her. My mum gave her a pitying look, soft and full of quiet sorrow, and after that the woman began waiting for my mum and my sister at the hospital entrance on the days we regularly visited. She'd bring candy or toys and smile as she handed them over to us, saying, "Oh, it feels like I'm being with my daughter again." My mum didn't know how to say no. At some point, I decided to stop going to the hospital. I couldn't explain why, but the way that the woman was always waiting and watching made me feel uneasy. Months passed. Then one day my mum invited me to come along again. I was surprised, but I agreed, thinking we might get some good food afterwards to eat. When my sister's appointment was done, we waited near the front desk. The woman wasn't there. I figured maybe she'd finally been discharged, but then I heard a voice behind me. "Found you." She was smiling. This time she was in regular clothes, not a hospital gown. My mum's face went pale. "Oh, I missed you, sweetie. I haven't seen you on Mondays lately. Now, if you're going to change your schedule, you should tell me." And then she looked at me and said, "It's been a while, hasn't it? Today I'm taking you out for lunch." She was insistent. Despite my mum's attempts to decline, she talked us into going to a nearby family restaurant. And she smiled the whole time, but something felt off about her smile. I still remember snippets of the conversation between her and my mum, and what I overheard has always disturbed me. "You have two, don't you? It's not like you'd be left with none. Please, stop. Don't be so harsh. Listen, if you keep talking like this, I'm going to call the police." "Then at least read this if you do." She handed my mum a sealed envelope. I don't remember how we got home after the restaurant, but I do remember we took a different road than usual, and that on the drive back, my mum suddenly turned and asked, "You love your little sister, don't you?" "Yeah," I replied. You're her big brother, you know? If anything ever happens, you gotta protect her, right? You know that, yeah? Okay, yeah. From now on, you're coming to the hospital too, okay? And you're not allowed to leave her side. At the time, I didn't understand what she meant, but I knew she needed me to do it. We saw the woman a few more times after that, and then, just like that, she was gone. Years later, I asked my mum about her. Hey, whatever happened to that woman from the hospital? My mum hesitated, then said, well, she probably passed away, but she wasn't actually that old. She was the same age as me. That hit me. Back then, my mum had been in her 30s, but the woman had looked closer to 60. And then my mum told me that she asked a nurse about the woman after that final encounter, and apparently she hadn't been sick at all. She'd been hospitalized for an attempt of taking her own life. The grief of losing her baby daughter had aged her quickly. Her physical appearance had deteriorated from the shock. And I remembered something that day when she first cried and said, "You look just like my daughter." My mum had been holding my baby sister. So, she wasn't talking to my mum. She was talking about my sister. My mum later admitted that the woman had started asking, almost begging, to spend time with my sister. She never said it directly, but there was this unspoken pressure behind it. That's why my mum started bringing me along, so someone would always be watching. Eventually, she showed me the letter from that envelope. She still kept it, and all it said was, "I'll be with my daughter again soon. It's your fault, and I'll never forgive you." I ride a motorcycle. I don't really use maps. I like to ride aimlessly. Just head wherever the road takes me. But once, that habit led me straight into something seriously messed up. So I figured I'd write it down, just in case it helps someone. It was a few years ago. I was cruising through the mountains, way out in the countryside. One of those places so remote you just stop seeing vending machines or traffic signs. Which was annoying because I was looking for a drink at the time. I finally found a vending machine beside a gravel road, half hidden behind some trees. I stopped to buy a bottle of green tea. I was just leaning against my bike, drinking, when this local-looking old guy walked up and started talking to me. "Where you headed?" "Nowhere in particular, just riding." "Nice bike. You gonna upgrade someday? Maybe a Harley, something like that?" "Nah, I'm good. Not really my thing." Just small talk, nothing unusual, but we got along surprisingly well. We spoke at length and discovered some common ground. As we were about to part ways, he said, "Come back sometime. My house is around here. Stop in if you ever pass it through." "Sure," I said. "Why not?" And that was that. Nothing weird, just a friendly local and a nice bit of countryside hospitality. So about a year later, I was out riding again and I realized I was back in the same area, and that old guy popped into my head. I didn't have his number or anything, and it wasn't pre-planned, but I figured I might try and find his place, drop in, surprise him. I had this dumb, hopeful image in my head of him shouting, "Hey, you really came back!" Like one of those heartfelt TV reunion shows. I don't know, I guess I'm kind of a lonely guy. Thing is, I didn't actually know where his house was. All I remembered that there was a vending machine, and him saying, "It's around here." So when I went back to that vending machine, I figured I'd ask someone. Eventually, I flagged down this old farmer woman and asked if she knew a guy who matched the description. His name, how he looked, etc. "Ah, that's Mr. she said. "He lives up past the next mountain. Little higher up." She said it so casually, but let me tell you, when country folks say around here, they mean miles away. And always double check what nearby means in the mountains. So I rode over to the next mountain, but I still didn't know exactly where to go. I kept taking paths that seemed to head uphill, but they always narrowed or dead-ended, and there were no houses nearby. Just when I was about to give up, I spotted another old farmer by the side of the road, and I described the guy again. "Oh yeah, Mr. If you keep going straight, you'll see a narrow road that cuts diagonally. That'll take you to his place." Of course, that straight ahead was another few kilometers of winding gravel track. On the way there, I came across this small clearing, off to the side of the road, just a patch of sandy ground. I figured it was probably used for cars to pass each other on the narrow mountain road. Now back then, I had just gotten my off-road bike and I was feeling kind of cocky. There's this move called an XL turn. You keep one foot down, crank the throttle, and spin the rear tire to turn the bike in place. It's hard to do on asphalt, since the tires grip too much, so I've been practicing on loose surfaces whenever I could find them. So yeah, I saw the sand and thought, what a perfect place to practice, so I went for it. The problem is, XL turns require commitment, and if you hesitate, the tire doesn't slide, it grabs, and then the bike just tips, which it did. My hand was still on the throttle though, so the bike jerked weirdly, flew off, and landed in the nearby grass. And that's when I heard it. Crack. Not a mechanical sound, not metal on gravel, but something broke. I ran over to check and found my bike had landed on what looked like several nailed together wooden boards buried under the grass. They looked like they had once been a whole object, maybe a sign or a structure, but now it was shattered. I froze. I glanced around, but I was deep in the mountains, and no one was in sight. It was probably some old trespassing sign, I told myself, nothing important. But I was worried I'd just damaged somebody's property. But there wasn't much I could do about that. I picked up my bike and rode off quickly, heart pounding a little harder than I wanted to admit. The thing is, something about that break didn't sit right with me. It didn't feel like it had been just a sign. I felt like I'd broken something meant to stay hidden. I shook off that feeling and carried on. Soon after, I reached the narrow, diagonal path that the second farmer had mentioned. It led me to a quiet house tucked deep in the trees, rustic 2-story, completely alone. The old guy from last year greeted me with a huge grin, just like I imagined. "Hey, you really came back." I smiled, relieved. Maybe this would be a good memory after all. He invited me to stay the night, said it was too late to be heading back, and his wife was already preparing dinner. She greeted me warmly, laid out a full countryside spread, miso soup, simmered vegetables, grilled fish, and poured us all tea. For a guy living alone in the city, that kind of warmth gets to you. It was peaceful. Quiet, like I was part of their home. It was like for one night only I was part of the family. But one thing stood out to me. Their phone sure rang a lot during dinner. The wife would quietly excuse herself, step into the hall, and answer, each time she returned looking tenser. She would pass me and take the call in the hallway, so I could overhear snatches of the conversations. "Yeah, he's staying tonight. No, he doesn't suspect anything. He said he's from the city." The old man poured sake, and his wife refilled my bowl again and again, with practiced grace. Their hospitality made me forget things, like being a stranger, like how deep in the mountains I was. But I couldn't ignore those phone calls, 3 in total during dinner, and they never spoke about the calls, neither of them offered an explanation. I tried to make conversation. "So, you two been living out here long?" The old man nodded. "Born and raised here, and we don't get many visitors." His wife said nothing, just cleared the dishes. "I'm surprised you even remember me." He gave a chuckle that didn't quite reach his eyes, and said, "Huh, out here, we remember everything." It was a strange answer. Later, they showed me to my room on the second floor. There was tatami mats, a futon, a low wooden dresser. It was simple, clean. A tiny paper lantern sat flickering in the corner. "Bathroom's downstairs, just past the kitchen," the old man said. His wife stood behind him, arms folded in her apron. "Sleep well," she said, and to me it sounded a bit more like a warning than a blessing. I lay in the futon fully clothed, phone tucked under the blanket, thumb hovering above the screen. No reception, of course, just a blinking red bar and 27% battery. I tried to sleep, but the silence was too loud. No crickets, no frogs, just the slow ticking of a wall clock in the hallway. And faintly, the sound of someone walking downstairs, back and forth, back and forth. Eventually, I must have dozed off. I don't know how long I was out there, but I woke up to a floorboard creaking right outside the door. Not a footstep, just the shift of weight, like someone standing there. I held my breath, eyes open in the dark. Then the light from under the door dimmed. They were standing right there. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. Whoever it was just stood there for minutes. Then slowly the light returned, and their shadow was gone. But the silence had changed. It felt thicker, like a paused silence, as if someone was listening. At some point, I fell asleep again. My dreams were fragmented. Wooden boards cracking under wheels, the sound of distant ringing phones, someone standing at the foot of the futon, whispering, just out of hearing range. And when I opened my eyes again, it was all still pitch black. I checked my phone. 2:06 a.m. Battery at 16%. That's when I heard a voice, low, muffled, not quite a whisper. "He's still here." It was coming from downstairs. Then another voice, sharper. "We'll wait, just in case he tries." I bolted upright, cold sweat clinging to my back. Nope, no more waiting. I slid out of the futon and packed my things as quietly as possible. Shoes in hand, I had to try and get out of there, so I crept into the hallway. Every step on the old floor groaned like a death sentence. I had no clue where the owners of the house could be. It was a total gamble, but a gamble I had to take. I passed the stairwell, without looking down. At the front entrance, I grabbed my helmet and eased the door open. I was feeling relieved. I was actually outside. Outside, it was colder than I remembered. The night was moonless, still. I didn't breathe until I stepped off the wooden porch. But as I reached for the bike, I stopped cold. The tires sagged. Both were flat. The rubber looked cleanly slashed, like a knife had done it. I wanted to scream. Instead, I laughed. Quiet, desperate, hopeless. I didn't have time to think. I just started pushing the bike, dead tires flapping against the gravel. I was just trying to get as far away as I could from the house before anyone noticed. Every few meters I stopped to listen. The night was unnaturally still. No dogs, no wind, just the quiet crunch of my own footsteps and the occasional wheeze of the handlebars. There wasn't a clear road, just a narrow dirt path leading downhill through the trees. I had no idea if it would lead to the main road or not, or a dead end or another house. After what felt like about 20 minutes, I let myself stop and breathe. And that's when I saw it. A light. Behind me. Not a flashlight, not headlights, just a warm yellow light from the direction of the house. Like someone had turned on the porch lamp. And I knew that hadn't been on when I left. They knew. I panicked, ducked off the path into the trees, dragging the bike with me until I couldn't anymore. It was useless now, dead weight. I left it propped against a fallen log and stumbled further into the forest. The branches tore at my sleeves. My socks were soaked from the dew. My breath came out in hot clouds that felt too loud. Like even the trees could hear me. And still, No sound from behind, which was somehow worse. Were they following quietly? Did they see any point in chasing me? Did they already know where I was? This damn network. Everyone was watching me. Everyone connected. Maybe there wasn't anywhere to run. I stopped by a cluster of trees, heart pounding so loud it hurt my ears, and I pulled my phone out. 11% battery. I dropped to the forest floor, and I curled up at the base of a thick tree and started typing this. Just in case. So if you're reading this, I messed up. The guy who shared this story isn't the type that you'd call superstitious. He doesn't have any kind of spiritual sensitivity, he doesn't go to shrines, doesn't carry lucky charms, none of that. In fact, he admits he's a total coward when it comes to scary stuff. But like a lot of people, he can't help himself. Every now and then he finds himself watching creepy ghost videos on the internet. Not because he enjoys it, more because it's like he's chasing the thrill. That rush of fear right before the regret sets in. And every single time, the same thing happens. As soon as the video ends, he feels it, a presence right beside him. He always whips around in a panic, heart pounding, half expecting to see something standing in the corner of his room, but there's never anything there. It never goes further than that. Until one night, everything changes. It's late. It's well past midnight. The outside world is completely still. No cars, no voices, just a deep, uncanny silence that only comes during the dead of night. He's in his room, sitting at his desk, hunched in front of his PC, watching yet another creepy video, alone, lights on, shivering a little, but telling himself it's just a dumb clip. And then, black. The monitor cuts out. The lights in his room snap off. Everything goes dark. Instant, total darkness. The guy jumps so hard that he nearly falls out of his chair. For a few seconds, he just sits there frozen, thinking, was that something paranormal? Did something just cut the power? The PC's dead. The room's pitch black. No sound, no flicker of electricity. Terrified, but trying his best not to completely lose it, he takes a few slow breaths, then cautiously leaves his room. He steps into the hallway, which is even darker, and he creeps forward, barefoot, every board creaking underfoot, until he reaches the breaker panel in his washroom. He opens the panel. There it is. There's the answer. It's just a tripped breaker. He flips it back and the lights come on, and he breathes this huge sigh of relief. Okay, I can wrap my head around this. It's just a power thing. It's nothing supernatural. I'm fine. He tells himself that over and over. And then he decides, alright, let's go pee. And then go to bed. And then no more scary videos tonight. So he turns to leave the washroom. And again he freezes. Because, for the life of him, he believes that there is something right behind him. Right at the entrance to the washroom. He doesn't hear it, he doesn't see it, but he does feel it. A presence. And not just like before, not some vague, creepy sensation. This one's heavy. So heavy. It's like the pressure underwater when you're drowning in the middle of the ocean. A fear so strong it doesn't tell you to run, it tells you it's already too late for you. He can't move. He's suffocated by this presence. He can't think. He's just stuck there. His muscles are locked. And his mind is just blank. And then, crack, a sudden sharp noise behind him, like a board snapping, or the sound a house makes when it settles, but that's a huge stretch. It just doesn't feel right. It's wrong. The snap somehow jolts him back to reality, and he forgets all about going to the bathroom, but he turns and he sprints back to his room, like something's chasing him. He throws himself into bed and he pulls the blankets over his body, and he's lying there, curled up tight, shaking. All he can hear is the ticking of his wall clock, second by second. Tick, tick, tick. And every tick just makes the silence feel louder. And then sometime later, he doesn't know how long, but there's a noise out of nowhere. Not a creak, not a thump. It's like a button. It's like the sound a button makes when you press it. A click, but long drawn out, like something's holding it down. That sound makes his heart skip. He lies there gripping his blanket. And then finally, somehow, he manages to fall asleep. He wakes up the next morning and the sun's out. The power's fine. He's safe. Except he kind of wet himself in his sleep. And he drags himself into the washroom to wash his underwear, feeling completely defeated, embarrassed. But then he notices something. That presence from the night before, it's still there. It's still right behind him in the exact same spot as last night. That same feeling, like it never left. He tries his best to keep calm and laugh it off, and he thinks thoughts like, man, I'm still jumpy, huh? Come on, just literally walk past this spot, it can't be anything. He opens the mirror, the bathroom mirror, just a crack to check, and he sees his reflection and nothing behind him. No ghosts, nothing weird, but that feeling still doesn't go away. Normally, if he looked, just looked, behind him, then that fear would pass, but not this time. It's still there, looming, getting bigger. His heart starts hammering, like he had just ran a marathon. He tells himself, just look directly behind you, just get it over with, that'll break it. But another voice in his head says, what if it's actually there? And then that thought is so strong, so suffocating that he starts sweating. And then he realizes he's already turned himself around. Without meaning to, his body has moved on its own. He's staring down the hallway, and it looks normal. Just a quiet, empty hallway. But for some reason, he's not relieved. Because that feeling, that crushing, inescapable presence never fades away. And ever since that night, every time he enters the washroom, he feels it. It's always there. Waiting. Watching. Growing. He doesn't know if it's his imagination or something real, but just to be safe, he's put salt in every room of the house, and he carries a protection charm from his local shrine. And whenever he leaves the washroom, he moonwalks out. He's still alive, for now. This story was told to me by a relative. Aiko, not her real name, was a woman in her early 40s, a single mother. Her husband passed away when their son was still in elementary school, and ever since, she's had to raise him on her own. The boy had been cheerful and outgoing as a child, but somewhere around middle school, things started to unravel. Health issues, pressure over future plans, and the onset of adolescence all collided, and it took a toll on his mental health. He became rebellious, even violent towards Aiko, and eventually stopped going to school altogether. Aiko was already under incredible stress, grieving for her husband, living with the fear and anxiety that comes with raising a child alone, and on top of that, dealing with domestic violence from her own son. And yet, despite everything, she'd been appointed as a class representative in her son's second year of middle school, a role that gave her no space to mentally recover or catch her breath. By the time her son reached third year, he had completely withdrawn from school. Still, Aiko continued to fulfill her responsibilities as class rep, attending meetings and planning events. Aiko was known among the PTA for being responsible and easy to talk to. She wasn't just competent, she stood out. Through her work as a rep, she gradually formed bonds with other members. The one she grew closest to was the head of the committee, a woman named B. B was about 5 years older than Aiko, and also came from a troubled family background, which naturally created a sense of camaraderie between them. B had a soft, low-paced demeanor. She was good at listening, really listening. Even though she had a bit of an odd personality, her warmth and patience made Aiko feel safe in a way that she seldom experienced. Aiko, who was usually cautious around others, came to trust B more than anyone. She told B everything, how she felt lonely after her husband died, how painful it was to be screamed and hit by the very child she'd raised with so much love and effort. Most of the other mums in the PTA had quote-unquote normal families. Aiko couldn't bring herself to talk about her situation around them. She felt ashamed somehow. But B had also been through divorce. She also was raising a child on her own. And so Aiko felt she could confide in her without judgment. They would meet to vent, talk, or just enjoy each other's company. B became her emotional support. Even after Aiko's son graduated middle school and began attending a correspondence-based high school, their friendship continued. They'd go out for lunch on weekends, shop together, chat online, nearly every day. Her son's rebellious phase wasn't over yet, but Aiko's own parents were old-fashioned. They clung to outdated ideas like, you just have to tough it out, and endurance is a virtue. They weren't of any help at all. Naturally, Aiko came to lean even more on B, the only person who genuinely empathized and offered encouragement without judgment. The comfort she felt around her made it easier to rely on her. And then one day, B messaged Aiko to invite her out for lunch. Usually they'd meet at some nearby cheap family restaurant, but this time B suggested something different. Do you want to try going somewhere a little farther today? Aiko thought it might be nice for a change and agreed without any second thoughts. They took B's car to the restaurant. After lunch, while they were sharing dessert, B casually asked, "Do you ever feel like it's really hard doing everything alone?" "Well, of course," Aiko replied without any hesitation. Then B continued, "Do you have anything to believe in?" Aiko didn't quite understand what she meant. "Well, not really, I guess not," she answered. "Well, with the way the world is today, that makes sense." They moved on to small talk and eventually left the restaurant. When they got in the car, B didn't drive in the direction of Aiko's house. "Hey, isn't this the wrong way? Are we going shopping or something?" "Oh, it's just a little detour. There's somewhere I want to go," B said, almost nonchalantly. About 10 minutes later, they turned a corner, and that's when Aiko started to feel a knot in her stomach. Wait, this area looks familiar. It hit her. They were near a known facility belonging to one of Japan's most powerful cults. And just as they passed through the large iron gates, B said, "Aiko, I think the reason you're struggling so much in life is because you don't have any faith. You need something to believe in. I've been listening to your problems for years now, but I'm at my limit. I can't help you anymore on my own. That's why I think it's time for you to join and let Sama help you find peace." In that moment, Aiko realized exactly what had happened. She'd been set up. They'd found someone like her, isolated, vulnerable, in pain, and slowly gained her trust, made her feel safe. Like she had found someone who understood her, and when her guard was down, they brought her here right to the gates of the cult itself. Later, Aiko would say, "I think B believed that if she got me inside the grounds, it'd be easier to persuade me. Like once I was physically there, I'd have no choice but to go along with it." Then B said, "Come on, I'll show you around, it's this way." The moment Aiko stepped out of the car, she bolted. She waited for the perfect opening and then took off running. Luckily, her family home was close by, only a few streets away, and she ran as fast as she could without ever looking back. After that day, Aiko erased every trace of B from her life. Phone numbers, chat history, everything. She never contacted her again. And to this day, she hasn't heard from her either. Time passed. Her son eventually outgrew his rebellious phase. They began to rebuild their relationship. One day, Aiko shared this story with him as something of a cautionary tale. Her son listened and said, "If you'd have gone through with it, if you'd actually joined, maybe you wouldn't have come back. And I'm really glad you did. And I'm sorry for everything I put you through back then." Now they've built a much stronger, trusting bond as mother and son. What happened to Aiko is not just a scary personal experience, it's a chilling example of how cults prey on the most vulnerable in society. They don't always come with robed leaders or grand ceremonies. Sometimes they look like a kind smile, a patient listener, a friend who always seems to be there when no one else is. Loneliness, grief, abuse, these are not just personal struggles, they're openings, cracks in a person's life that can be quietly, systematically exploited. The danger is real, and it's not always in some faraway compound. It might be sitting across from you at lunch. Hi, Jay here. I know you must be curious about the cult mentioned, so based on the details in the story, I'm gonna guess, but I think I might be right. I believe the cult in question may have been Sokagakai. This suspicion is based on several key elements. The cult is described as well known and powerful in Japan, with its own facility, and that kind of chimes with Sokagakai. They operate community centers nationwide. The method of gradual emotional grooming through, this trusted friend, and the suggestion that a personal hardship is due to some sort of lack of belief, that kind of matches reports and allegations surrounding their outreach tactics, particularly, by the way, through PTA or community volunteer roles. And one of the phrases, "Do you have anything you believed in?" followed by a sudden detour to a religious facility, that just echoes recruitment stories that have been documented by former members and critics of the group. While Sokagakai presents itself as a mainstream lay Buddhist movement, its aggressive recruitment practices, its communities and pressure tactics have earned it a cult-like reputation in certain circles, especially those who've gone on to leave their organization. So, if you or someone you know is struggling, be mindful of who you open up to. True support never really demands blind faith. And no one, no matter how gentle their voice or understanding their words are, has the right to manipulate your pain for belief.